America's top generals last night gave stunning evidence to a Senate hearing. Evidence confirming President Joe Biden is either a liar or that he's so confused now that his memory is shot. Either way, Biden is fast becoming the most embarrassing president in US history, and I wonder how much longer he can stay, because this is actually worse than embarrassing, it's dangerous. When the United States last month suddenly abandoned Afghanistan, the chaos that caused was terrible. The Afghan government instantly collapsed, the Taliban extremists took over without a shot being fired, and in that chaos, the US left behind some 200 US citizens, and it also lost 13 military in an ISIS suicide bombing. And days later, Joe Biden was asked this question, and he lied or misremembered.
Your top military advisors warned against withdrawing on this timeline. They wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops.
No, they didn't. It was split. That wasn't true.
Your military advisors did not tell you, no, we should just keep 2,500 troops. It's been a stable situation for the last several years. We can do that. We can continue to do that.
No, no one said that to me that I can recall.
No one said that? Well, that turns out to be absolutely false. Last night, the general in charge of Afghanistan, the US operations there, he exposed that lie or that memory fail. He said that he had indeed asked for US soldiers, 2,500, to stay, and the US top general, Mark Milley, said the same.
I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, and I also recommended earlier in the fall of 2020 that we maintain 4,500 at that time. Those are my personal views. I also have a view that the withdrawal of those forces would lead inevitably to the collapse of the Afghan military forces and eventually the Afghan government.
And I do agree with that.
So Biden had lied or simply could not remember the most critical advice given to him by at least three of those senior generals, advice that could have stopped the Taliban from totally conquering Afghanistan. And now that top general, Mark Milley, he said the result was that the fight against Islamist terrorism had just got harder because of this, more dangerous.
But we must continue to protect the United States of America and its people from terrorist attacks coming from Afghanistan. That mission will be much harder now.
Joining me is Mark Christian, a retired Air Force colonel who headed the US National Air and Space Intelligence Center, which advised the US Defense Department on emerging threats. Mark Christian, thank you for joining me again. The evidence here is not just that Biden ignored his top generals on Afghanistan, and it's his right as Commander-in-Chief to do that, but that he lied to the American people about what had been told, or he simply couldn't remember. How serious is this for you?
For the United States, it's very serious because you've lost the ability to take on the terrorist threat inside their own homeland. They've lost the capability to, stage operations inside the country, and they've lost. They would have to do everything from overfly essentially unfriendly countries to the United States, either with or without permission, in order to strike them in Afghanistan if the need should arise. So it's a very serious issue at this time.
Now, there are two issues here, of course. One is the strategic decision where he overruled his generals and abandoned Afghanistan and left it more vulnerable in the manner that you suggest. What about the other issue? What trust can the US military have in their commander-in-chief when Biden tells the world in a TV interview that they didn't give him the advice that they should have and that they actually did?
Well, Andrew, that's an interesting question. When the generals, the way it works is the chairman of the Joint Staff and the generals that are part of the Joint Staff, they are merely an advisory body to the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States. The real chain of command is the President to the combatant commander, which is General McKenzie for U.S. Central Command in Florida, who oversees the forces in the Middle East. So if those generals told him that they needed 2,500 or 4,000 troops to maintain some semblance of order or support for the Afghan national forces, and I would believe that they would have told him that, because if they didn't do it, they knew that essentially the Afghan forces, first of all, they hadn't been paid in 7 to 8 months. And the way the Afghans work and their culture, if you're not getting paid and you're not feeding your family, then they'll switch sides. And that's exactly what happened. They weren't paid just because of the corrupt military, the corrupt politicians, the whole infrastructure is corruption. And as soon as the paychecks stop coming, their loyalty fades quickly. And of course, the U.S. troops would have been able to put pressure on the Afghan government and in order to help make sure that they were paid. But obviously that didn't happen. So there were also intelligence people that would have been able to recognize that the Taliban and the other ISIS forces were building up. And if they didn't know that, then that would be a serious, serious intelligence failure. And I would find that very hard.
But that's the point here. That's the point for me, that Joe Biden made his generals look like clowns. Apparently, they didn't tell me that we need to do all these basic things that you're talking about, and they did. They did, and now they've dumped him in the mess.
Right.
There's one last thing. The US has had Afghanistan lost, that chaos at the airport, people died there, 13 soldiers killed in an ISIS bombing outside the airport. You've had US citizens left behind, lots of weaponry left behind as well for the Taliban, an increased terrorist threat as a result. And on top of all that, the US then bombed what it wrongly thought was the car of a terrorist, instead killed an aid worker and 7 children. Yet the only person in this fiasco who has been jailed or even lost the job is a Marine colonel who filmed this video demanding accountability and is now in the brig. Here he is.
I have a growing discontent and contempt for my perceived ineptitude at the foreign policy level, and I want to specifically ask some questions to some of my senior leaders. I have been fighting for 17 years. I am willing to throw it all away to say to my senior leaders, I demand accountability.
So as a fellow colonel, how do you feel about that colonel being the only one in jail or even out of a job?
Well, sir, the American military takes a oath of allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, unlike other countries that take other allegiances. And so he has every right to ask those questions, and he shouldn't be in the brig. He should be able to ask his commanders and the chain of command, why? What happened? Why did this happen? Why did this operation fail the way it did? Well, they basically cut and run. That's what happened. And there should be a lot of accountable senior officers, colonels, generals, certainly politicians, and certainly the National Security Council and the rest of them. They have a lot to answer for. Whether they'll ever get the answers, I suspect they will not.
I think you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, Mark Christian, I'm as cynical as you are. Thank you so much for your time.